friends, welcome. We are really excited about this episode. We're back doing deep dive, and this deep dive is the story of 2112. If we can do the whole album, we will, but we may just do side one. So before we get going, we have a all-star cast, star-studded panel here.
Yeah, they'll
Jim
be
Benner.
along later, but we're here now.
But in the meantime, we're here. Jim Benner, Paul Simon, and Donna Halper. And we're really thrilled. We're excited to be here. But before we get going, on behalf of Rush fans, we have to give a great shout out and congratulations to Donna Halper for her recent induction into the Massachusetts Broadcasters Hall of Fame.
Yeah, awesome.
Congrats. Donna, I'm sorry I didn't tell you I was going to do that.
Well,
great.
And Neil was really, God rest Neil's soul. I think Neil would have been impressed. But no, the reality is that the guys in the band were very, they were happy for me, and because I let them know immediately. Yeah. But the fact remains, it's just another example. I was inducted because of my 4 decades in broadcasting and because of my work as a media historian, but also, let's be honest, because I was on the radio at a time when music directors and program directors could get behind a band, give it some airplay, do what needed to be done. We had that freedom back then. And the fact that I was involved in the discovery of Rush and launching their career in the United States and all of these other good things was just part of my career. But it's a part that has been life-changing for me. And as I've said on more than one occasion, and then we'll drop the subject, if you had told me back in the spring of 1974, when Bob Roper sent me that record, that we would still be talking about this coming on to 49 years later, that I would be like emailing Alex and Getty, that I would be talking to their management, that we'd all still be in touch, that I would be part of a worldwide community of fans. Never expected it. Profoundly grateful for it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And earned.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, we wouldn't be talking about a 1976 record if that were not the case.
Exactly. And it all started because of an act of altruism. And I cannot ignore the fact that if Bob Roper had not, he and I are still in touch. If Bob Roper had not taken that record off of the ash can, as it were, because his label wasn't going to sign them, if he hadn't just said, you know what, I know somebody down in the States that plays imports, and I believe in this record, and I think that we should have signed them, and here, let me send it on to somebody else and see if I can at least get them some airplay. Can't do it up here? Maybe I can do it with some of my friends. And that's what Roper did. And I know I'm being repetitious. I'm like history. I keep repeating myself. But the fact is, if he hadn't done that, and if I hadn't had the freedom to play it, and if the fans hadn't responded, I mean, people say to me, oh, did you get a finder's fee? Nah, I got a 49-year friendship. And I'm profoundly grateful. And I'll take the 49-year friendship because you know what? Money comes and goes. But friendship, I have met so many wonderful people because of this. And for those of you that are sitting there going, oh, God, not this again. Actually, this sort of relates to the theme of the record. Because the theme of the record is about think for yourself. The theme of the record is about take chances where maybe other people aren't. The theme of the record is there's all this conformity out there. You don't have to do that. You can really, as it were, fly your own flag, play your own kind of music, do the stuff that you feel is ethical and honorable, and make a difference in the way that you feel is best. So I think this is actually kind of germane in a way.
That's perfect because, that record, they got an American tour with Uriah Heep and Manfred Mann. They did their second album, Fly By Night. Neil was writing lyrics. They appeared on Don Kirshner's rock concert because of that. If you know what I'm talking about, you're really old. And then they did Caress of Steel.
Au contraire, mon frere. Every day we are getting new Rush fans. Okay. I asked on my Facebook page a couple of days ago, and I throw it out here one more time. If there is a Rush song that changed your life, that is identified with some part of your life that completely changed because of Rush and because of that song, message me. We're going to do an episode about that. But that having been said, one of the things that keeps coming up over and over and over again is how many people were influenced by some of the lyrics of Rush songs even back then. And the people that are telling me this are like 18, 19. And I'm like, you weren't even born back then. And they were like, yeah, but my father or my mother or a friend of mine or my
next generation
cousin
including my
Chaim,
grandfather.
or I was on Spotify, or we're getting new fans all the time. So yeah, it's true. Maybe you're not 76 like me. Maybe you weren't there at the beginning. Okay, but maybe you're 18 and you're just finding the band and you're like, where have I been? These guys are great. Because this happens all the time.
Oh, yeah.
I got asked about that by a reporter the other day. It's like, well, what are Rush fans doing since the band broke up? Continuing to enjoy their music and bringing in new fans.
Yep. That's pretty much.
So anyway, so you're only semi-right. It is true. There are a lot of people that weren't around for the first Rush album, God Rest the Soul of John Rutsey. There are people who were not around when Neil joined the band, God Rest Neil. There are people who the first album they ever heard was Moving Pictures or Power Windows or,
Sure.
But once you find it, you want to find out everything else you missed.
You go back. And forward.
And there's a tie to what you just mentioned. Fly By Night contains a song called Anthem. Absolutely. And this is where Neil's influence first really starts manifesting. That second album is kind of a transitional album. There's a part of it that's kind of like, oh, here's an homage to John Rutsey. And then there's part of it where it's like, wow, this is something totally new. And
definitely not the first album.
No, definitely
not a repeat.
But it's not quite the second. It's not quite the third or the fourth album either. There's just in transition. And there are some people when they listen to those first two that are kind of like, and I'm like, nah, go listen. Because this is where everybody came from. This is what made them what they became. And in Anthem, it has some very misunderstood lyrics. And we're going to see this in 2112 as well. Where it talks about, I know you've heard that selfishness is wrong, but it was for me, not you. I came to write this song. All Neil is saying, I think, in that song, is that the role of the artist, as he sees it, is to put those ideas out there. He doesn't want you to think his thoughts. He's thinking his thoughts. He wants you to come up with your thoughts. And we're going to see this as a thread in Rush songs from that time on.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. The trees talked about that.
There are a multitude of, we could spend like 15 hours talking.
That'd be the whole episode. So what happened was, after Fly By Night, Caress of Steel comes along, and they were kids. I mean, let's be honest. They were in their early 20s, 21, 22 years old.
22, 23.
And they wrote music that, I mean, I don't know what I was doing at 2021, but it wasn't writing The Necromancer or The Fountain of Lambeth or about the French Revolution.
I was at Mercury Records when that came out. I was there. And Mercury was bitterly disappointed by that record.
Yes. And that's the thing. They were proud of this record. Alex said in the Beyond the Light Stage documentary, he said, we were so proud, or Neil said, we were so proud of what we had done. Paul Stanley didn't get it. Alex said, I don't think we got it. And then they went from playing arenas to small clubs, opening for Ted Nugent. My, how humiliating that must have been. And so here they are. And the record company says, we need singles.
Yep. Need a hit.
Right? Shorter songs. Yep. So one question I have, Donna, for you is, since you know the band, what did you know around that particular time before 2112 came out? Were you having conversations with them?
Oh, yeah. There was tremendous pressure on them to come up with the hit. And that's what happened when In the Mood, okay, on the first Rush album, that everyone told them, if you don't have a 3-minute single, I lost my baby, bop, bop, shabop, doo-wah, forget about the philosophy, just, hey, baby, it's a chord, I feel like I'm in the mood. Just nothing deep, just something that's got a good beat, easy to dance to. But by this time, the guys have Neil. And they're not doing, hey, baby, it's a quarter to whenever, I feel like I'm in the mood. They're looking at bigger things. And what they come up with isn't what Mercury expected or wanted, said Donna, who was there. And I'm repeating that I was there because I didn't just read this in the trades. I sat through those meetings, okay? And there was a lot of hope that the guys would come up with something commercial that they could work to top 40 radio. If you're not from that era, I don't know how old everybody is. How old are all you guys? How old's everybody?
Pushing 60.
Go, Paul?
50.
Jimmy?
55.
Okay, so you're 50s, 60s, 70s. Okay,
yeah.
But
we remember
that's the era. All joking aside, I'm going somewhere with this. And if I'm going to make an analogy, I don't want to make one that people are sitting there going. But the fact is, radio has changed dramatically over the past 20, 25 years. Right. In the 60s, 70s, 80s, even to some degree into the 90s, if you didn't have a hit single, you were not going to get that top 40 airplay. Radio was still the king. There's no Spotify. There's no Pandora. There's no Sirius XM. There's just your local, by that time, FM station. And you need that 3 or 4 minute song with the catchy hook. It can have interesting stuff to say, but it's got to be melodic and this and that. And I was in those meetings, okay? And the guys absolutely were told. I wasn't in the ones where they specifically were told, but I'm saying I was in artists and repertoire meetings all the time because I was the associate artist and repertoire director for the company. So I was in those meetings when a band would be told, come up with something melodic or something commercial that we can get on top 40. You can have all the other album tracks you want. Look at Kiss. Kiss had these kick butt rock and roll songs, but they also had Beth.
Yeah.
Now, I can tell you, wasn't their first choice. But the label was like, oh, thank God, something we can work to top 40. the problem, of course, was now everybody thought that Kiss was a ballad band that did all these songs about, my girlfriend's waiting at home, and
then they did the disco album.
So this was the problem for Rush. They were like, so we're supposed to kind of sell out, right? We're supposed to kind of compromise our artistic integrity, the whole thing in Spirit of Radio, we're supposed to go for the money. Okay, fine, understand. Yep, going for the money. Yep. And they came up with Caressive Steel. And nobody at the label was happy. Now, frankly, I thought they should have worked Tears. I thought that they should have waited a while and come up with a song like Tears, because 2112, amazing record. Tears, very commercial, very melodic, very mass appeal. If they had just come up with something like that, but that wasn't where they were going musically at that time. Right. I got it. I understood it. I respected it. Nobody at Mercury was happy. And interestingly enough, Caressive Steel, I think, was a little ahead of its time, even for Rush, because by their own admission, when they went out to do the tours, fans didn't get it. The fans were not that fun. Now, Caressive Steel has aged a lot better than at the time. If you look at the reviews from back then, nobody liked that record. Today, people have a renewed appreciation for it. 2112, on the other hand, the critics hated it, but the fans liked it immediately. And because the fans liked it immediately, sales went through the roof, and that pretty much shut up the folks at Mercury about where's the hit single. They didn't have to worry about releasing Tears. They could just be like, oh, ka-ching, everybody's buying this record. And it really encouraged the band. They felt a lot better about it. But yeah, it had been pretty touch and go. They were on the verge of getting dropped, and that's a fact. Mercury was about to just say, well, if this is where you're going.
Yeah, forget it.
Yeah. And if you're a kid at that time, compared to Caressive Steel, the album artwork.
Oh,
the star, the water, the color, everything, it was captivating, absolutely captivating. And, Temple of the Syrinx talks about computers, but this was 76. What do we know about computers? And you look at the inside of the record, and there's, something computer.
And isn't this,
it's like
isn't this the first, and correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, but isn't this the first album that has like a Mellotron on it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
They weren't using Mellotrons.
No.
Yeah. So
nope.
Their response to the rejection of Caressive Steel and the pressure put on them to become Bad Company and to do singles was 2112. And as Neil has said several times, they were angry. They were very angry. They were kids. Neil had, of course, before that, gone off to London with big dreams, and those dreams didn't pan out. And then he came back, and this was after J.R. Flood. And then he ended up, auditioning for Rush, and they picked him. And so all of a sudden they wanted to, as all kids do, my identity isn't my parents, my religion, my background. My identity has to be me. And 2112 seems to be about that. So,
and we're starting to see that with Anthem. We are just starting to see Neil coming forward with, these are my views. This is what I believe. It may not be right for everybody, but it's right for me.
Yeah, that was great about Neil. It wasn't dogmatism. It was this is me.
The individual.
Never imposed it on anyone. Never imposed it on a soul. Now, the guys in the band bought into the whole Ayn Rand thing, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. They bought in, and then eventually they bought out. Okay? But at the time,
I want to read something in Neil's book, Traveling Music. where he
it's
talks
right
about the
there.
Ayn Rand influence. And of course, this has been rehearsed 1,000 times over. And people that still want to say that Rush is the band of Ayn Rand, they haven't listened to anything from 1980 forward.
Oh, that
Yeah,
used to
exactly.
get Neil nuts. That
I
made
bet.
Neil crazy.
Yeah. So, but here's the thing. I mean, I was a kid and I got turned on to 2112 when I was 11 years old. And I think I read The Fountainhead when I was 15. And
As
it
did
appeared,
we all. As did we all.
and it just, and I later read, Anthem, which if you've read Anthem, you see the
Yep. And
structure of
Atlas Shrugged
2112.
and every
It's
last.
the
Yep.
same
Yep.
Right.
story, right? But it wasn't her wholesale philosophy. It never was. They were kids that wanted to express themselves creatively, and the record companies told them, I mean, imagine you're a 20, 21, 22-year old young adult. You're making records, you're playing before huge audiences with Uriah Heep, and this big corporation, a record company, tells you you have to do this. And they're idealistic. And Neil said,
Yeah.
he's always been idealistic. So about Ayn Rand, he said, to a 20-year-old struggling musician, The Fountainhead was a revelation, an affirmation, and inspiration. Although I would eventually grow into and largely out of Ayn Rand's orbit, her writing was still a significant stepping stone or a way station. It was almost like, just I'm interrupting this to it it affirmed us. It told us it was okay to be who we are. For me, a black and white starting point, that's important, a black and white starting point along the journey to a more nuanced philosophy in politics. Most of all, it was the notion of individualism that I, Neil, needed. The idea that what I felt, believed, liked, and wanted was important and valid. But then he goes, as Nietzsche said, Neil loved Nietzsche, self-interest is worth as much as the person who has it. It can be worth great detail, or worth a great deal, and it can be unworthy and contemptible. In other words, have self-interest, but be a self-worthy of self-interest. And so that is why eventually they greatly, departed from Rand because she was all, the virtue of selfishness. I've read all of her nonfiction works, Objectivism, and all of
Yeah.
that. It wasn't about her whole philosophy. It spoke to them as to be creatively free.
Every
And
high school and college age kid that I know read Atlas Shrugged. Okay. Now, let's be honest. It's 1,000 pages or something. I don't know anybody that read the whole 1,000. You dip
kids
in,
don't do
you
it
dip
today.
out, you dip in, you dip out.
Yeah.
Well, they make
But
cliff notes.
yeah, and ditto for the Fountainhead, which is a little bit easier to read. But in both cases, you're in high school or you're in college, you are surrounded by people that are telling you, well, you should join the family business, or you should go into this occupation, or you'll never make a living doing that, or what's wrong with the way you dress, or how come you have long hair, or, this or that. And here's these books where the heroes, and to some degree the heroines, the people that do the best are the people that are the most individualistic, that have their own personal code, they're ethical, they're honorable, but they don't do anything without wanting to do it. No one can guilt them into it. No one can force them into it. You're a kind of angsty, insecure kid, and you're just like, wow. So you can be yourself and get ahead. You can be yourself and be one of the makers of the world. You can create something.
right. And isn't that a message for today? Right. So many
Yeah.
people being told not to be who you are.
Oh yeah. Now, of
And
course,
Rush still
people turn
speaks
that
to us
into a
today.
cult of personality around Ayn Rand, which kind of wasn't the point.
Right.
I mean, it
Kind
may
of
have been
contrary
point
to the
for
whole
her,
point.
but, you know, but Neil said on more than one occasion, years later, said people got angry with him because he kind of had moved on. But he said, do you wear the same clothes you wore 30, 40 years ago? Do you eat the same food? Do you go to the same places? People move on. That's why I keep saying to people, go listen to the first Rush album. It's not the second or the third, but it helped get them where they are.
Right.
And Ayn Rand was a place where Neil could find affirmation of his desire to be himself. As time went on, he found a lot of things that were wrong with that philosophy. He found a lot of things that just did not work for him. That whole virtue of selfishness thing, he said he saw too much injustice, and he got to a point where he couldn't look away. But that's not to denigrate what he learned from Ayn Rand. Just like next.
Yeah.
And he didn't have to act like that wasn't an influence. Right? That was integrity as well.
He said in a 2006 interview, he said, I cringe when I read some of those lyrics today. I cringe.
Let's start the deep dive into the 7-part suite. Paul.
7. Yes. Paul goes first.
Go first.
Yes, go. You're the man, dude.
Well, beginning with the overture, I'll then happily start with the lyrics. No. The earth. Next. Thank you. No. Well, we start with the part 1, the overture. So incorporating obviously it being an overture, we incorporated all the pieces that we are going to hear throughout the entire piece. And not being a professional musician, I don't want to speak to that part, but we would need a professional musician to do that. Luckily, we do have one with us. But we will be hearing pieces that we're going to hear in all 7 parts here. And what I will say, well, my favorite piece is coming up, and I will happily chime in when we get to there. But if I am correct, I believe that this was the only part that received serious radio play at first, not counting Temples of Syrinx. Is that correct? Thank you.
As far as I know, yes. And by the way, Paul, I wasn't trying to put you on the spot. I was just like,
no worries.
I was actually emails from people saying this particular song really, and I had to ask.
Actually, no worries, because I actually had an answer to that too. I was going to say Between Tears and Something for Nothing, not counting side A, but anyway, so.
Yeah.
That is how I'll begin.
Let me do a little reading. What was great about this record, and this was stuff that you could do back in the 70s and in prog rock. There's a story that's, back in the day, now it's all, streaming, right? But we had records and they were gatefold and we could open them up and read the liner notes. And there's a story going on. And Temples of Syrinx, the massive gray walls of the temples rise from the heart of every Federation city. I have always been awed by them, to think that every single facet of every life is regulated and directed from within. Our books, our music, our work and play are all looked after by the benevolent wisdom of the priests. And of course, Overture and Temples, they played throughout their entire touring career, except for the first leg of the Snakes and Arrows. They didn't play it, brought it back on the second leg. But Jim, can I turn to you to comment on Temples of Syrinx?
Yeah, I think Overture does I know you said Temple of Syrinx, but Overture does such a fantastic job of setting the stage of the first side of this album, and it flows seamlessly into Temples of Syrinx, so with just that one lyric at the very end, and the meek shall inherit the earth, and then they go into it, and it's still rocking out just like they did before. And it's really kind of setting, to me, it's kind of setting the stage of, okay, what do these priests do for us? Like, what is life in this realm or this universe that Neil has created kind of like? They give you things, right? They give you everything. They give you the words that you say, the music you listen to, everything is given to you, the art that you're going to appreciate. And that's kind of where at least our, antagonist is hanging out in this universe. It's a rockin' tune, and it just really sets that realm and that reality to me.
And as a lyrics person and as a professor of English literature, two things came to mind when I read the lyrics. Thing number one, the line from the meek will inherit the earth, which, by the way, terrible translation. It's not what the biblical Hebrew says at all. But, thank you, King James. But it's from Psalms 37, verse 11, I think, said Donna, who used to be a chaplain. And it's usually badly translated as the meek will inherit the earth. But the word meek actually means humble, someone who is not prideful. Okay. It was applied to Moses, if I'm not mistaken. Now, the man Moses was the most humble person on the face of the earth, Numbers chapter 12, I think. But the fact is, though, in this universe, the only way you get over in this conformist world is by being meek, by being afraid, by being someone who's willing to surrender yourself to the greater knowledge, the greater good, and never question it. And also, did I say something that was, you started to say something, David? I didn't know if I was completely off base here.
No. You're
the other thing
right on track.
Yeah, the other thing that attracted me to the lyrics was the Syrinx. Why Syrinx? Well, it's a flute. If you know your literature and if you know your Greek mythology, the pipes of Pan, that kind of thing, Neil is a reader. Yeah. Neil loves him some mythology.
And his mother said he read everything.
Oh, God, yes. And the pipes, that's the flute that was played by the shepherds. And what do the shepherds do? They call the sheep.
Yep.
And this is Neil to me. Just kind of a little stuck here, a little dig about the people that are all sheep. Okay? Yeah. That line from Simon and Garfunkel, and the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they'd made, that kind of thing. It's like, okay, and we're going to see this recur when Neil writes Free Will. Now, and when Neil writes various other songs, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice, and you see it in others. His mind is not for rent to any god or government. But in this world, everybody has rented out their mind. Yeah. Everyone is meek. Everyone is following along like sheep. Everyone is a conformist. And I'm thinking Neil, who loved his father dearly. And his father really did. And I knew Glenn, and what a sweetheart, God rest his soul. But I can like be a fly on the wall imagining his father saying to him, yeah, this rock and roll stuff, why don't you come back and work at the family store? You can like sell equipment, it's
he just got promoted to parts manager.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you can work in the parts department. Now, again, I'm not putting that down. My father worked in a warehouse all the days of his life and was able, even on a crappy salary, he was able, along with my mother, to save up enough for me to go to college. Okay. Now, I worked my way through, but they got me started. It would not have. But if my father had been, for example, a small shopkeeper, I promise you, he wouldn't have wanted me to go into radio. Who makes a living in radio? He would have wanted me to hey, we got this family candy store. You can work there. And I can hear those conversations.
You need security.
Alex's parents, Neil's parents. Come home, work at the family store. And it wasn't for them. And they had
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
And in this
And so
world,
then
that's what everyone's doing. They're just like giving up their dream and just
and then they're losing the race to rats subdivisions. And then what happens? The protagonist in the story has a little bit of individuality despite the society and the social order, and he
Right.
has this place that he likes to go, a cave behind a waterfall. And one day he finds something that he doesn't know what it is. And he says, behind my beloved waterfall, in the little room that was hidden beneath the cave, I found I found it. I brushed away the dust of the years and picked it up, holding it reverently in my hands. I had no idea what it might be, but it was beautiful. I learned to lay my fingers across the wires and to turn the keys to make them sound differently. As I struck the wires with my other hand, I produced my first harmonious sounds, and soon my own music, not what the priest of the temples of Syrinx said,
Right.
How different it could be for the music of the temples. I can't wait to tell the priests about it. And so our protagonist now has found something that spoke to him, resonated with him. Of course, his mistake was the priest told me to tell us all to listen to this, and this is our music, all the sounds we hear. But now I've found something different. I'm going to go back and share it with them. Before we go into a presentation, just a few words about um, Alex's opening, the guitar's out of tune,
Right.
and
He
he's
tunes it up.
recreating this experience of
Discovery.
hitting each note and the harmonics, bringing it into tune. Absolutely magnificent.
Oh,
I
yeah.
wish I could have written that. I mean, I'm 58. I couldn't write that today, much less when I was Alex's
No.
age at that time.
No,
But,
me neither.
the first time I heard it, it's like, this isn't just a jam. He's building something up and then, brought it into the lyrics and, notes that fall gently like rain, build high like a mountain, fall gently like rain. The music fall in Getty's voice, whatever people want to say about Getty's voice, they don't, they shouldn't say that because he could capture the heart of the
Yeah.
song with his voice. And to me, Discovery is one of the best things Rush has ever done, in my opinion, for that reason. So I'll stop talking for a moment. Paul, Jim,
That
Donna,
simple riff is what I love most about musically about this song. It is so simple and beautiful. Musically, not to take away from the brilliance and the genius musically specifically about the rest of the other pieces, but that simple, just, and and I don't mean to commit heresy here, but I'm not even that big into, for example, only I know that Alex said he was influenced by Jimmy Page in the early days, but just that simple riff that the tuning turns into the simple strumming. And here's a little bit of bluesy. That was my in for the song 2112 musically. It's just that riff. Oh, why? Before
we started taping, we were just kibitzing. And I mentioned that I thought it was really interesting that Neil wrote in that the guy finds a guitar. Neil's not a guitarist. But historically, in mythology and otherwise, the wandering minstrel, the singer-songwriter, the person who uses music to speak truth. I showed you guys a picture of the great folk singer Woody Guthrie. And in 1943, during World War II, he put on his guitar a little sign that said, "This machine kills fascists." And he was right, because historically, the people that wanted to impose conformity, whether it was governments or kings or religions or whoever, first thing they did was try to shut down the music, try to tell you what you could listen to.
Right.
And the singer-songwriters, they just continued on wandering from city to city, playing what they needed to play. And this is the very first time we see the importance of music as a kind of freedom. And this is what the guys in the band had been fighting for.
All right. It was their own revolt against what the record company was telling them.
That, boom. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. So then, our protagonist takes it to the priests and Father Brown. I'll have some things to say about Father Brown later at the end. Hopefully we have time. And he goes, in the sudden silence, as I finished playing, I looked up to a circle of grim, expressionless faces. Father Brown rose to his feet, and his somnolent voice echoed throughout the silent temple hall. Instead of the grateful joy that I expected, there were words of quiet rejection. Instead of praise, sullen dismissal. And here's the key. I watched in shock and horror as Father Brown ground my precious instrument to splinters beneath his feet. So the symbol of his freedom was crushed. And of course, this is what leads then into the next couple sections of the song. Everything that now mattered to him was gone.
Yeah.
And imagine how the guys must have felt at Mercury when they come up with what they think is a great record and everybody goes,
yeah, you feel
this isn't
you
it.
feel kind of crushed and defeated after that. I think Presentation is a completely amazing song, from the how they did the music matching with the lyrics. It's nice and quiet when the protagonist is speaking, says, I know it's most unusual to come before you, so please forgive me, but I have this thing. And he loves this so much. He felt it, like you can sort of hear it, like in the lyrics and in Geddy's delivery. And I agree with you, David, about Geddy stuff. The way he delivered lyrics in this song, all of these songs were amazing. But this guy feels it so much in his heart that he just wants to share it. That's all. He doesn't want to hurt anybody. He just wants to share this beauty.
He thinks it'll make things better.
Yeah. And then
and
then it's like he just gets a huge proverbial slap across the face for it. So he's completely
I'd never thought about
stunned.
this before, but the guitar was Chris of Steel.
They
introduced Chris of Steel, and it got shattered to splinters beneath their feet, and the Down the Tubes tour that followed.
But Chris of Steel is still an awesome album. But Presentation is great. It's one of my favorites on side one.
Yeah. And can we stop and respect how incredibly difficult it is to pull off two such distinct to write and perform two such distinct vocals in different voices, quite literally and metaphorically, in that song.
For sure. And you can hear it. You can,
and then the intensity of the instrumental at the end, and Alex's guitar playing, and Geddy just in that B minor, just so powerful. And then it comes to a close.
Yep.
And as a listener, if you're a kid, now again, they're 23, 24. One of them is 24 by this point. The other two are 23. They're still kids themselves. And they were so hopeful after Fly By Night.
Yeah.
And so crushed after Caress of Steel. And now it's kind of like they're discussing that journey. And if you're a listener, you're a kid too, probably. you're college age and you've come home. And as I said before, you've told your mother and father that like you decided you want to be a philosopher.
Or whatever.
You want to be a philosopher. And your mother and father are like, no, you're going to be a dry cleaner.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
We didn't send you to college to be a philosopher. And here's these kids that are like so joyful. And they're hearing these lyrics. And they're like, yeah, this.
Yeah.
It still has that effect on people even today.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So our protagonist now is a little distressed. Right? He's walking home through silent streets. And I will read the whole thing, but he encounters this oracle that shows him this previous world where people built things, wrote things, sang things, and it wasn't all ordered or dictated for them. And this was Neil at this time, right? It was individual creativity to be who I want to be.
Right.
Desperately needing to be that, right? And so our protagonist encounters the oracle that shows him this world, and just to think about my life, what my life might be in a world that I have seen. So as a kid listening to this, I mean, I'd come home from school and I'd throw this record on and put on my headphones, maybe smoke something back in those days. But this part, I would picture the streets just walking home through silent streets and being so distressed about, because, in those days, we all wanted to be heard. Right. And, we had good ideas, great plans, and this kind of sci-fi story, for me at least, certainly spoke to my own experience. And I was kind of weird. I didn't fit in with, my school.
Of course not.
There's an autobiographical thing here too from Ayn Rand herself. I mean, Anthem, and I'm sure everybody knows this, so forgive me if I'm just being redundant, but Ayn Rand wrote Anthem. It's a novella. It's not like a whole, it was published in a science fiction magazine eventually. Right. But when she wrote it in like 1937. She could not find an American publisher. Nobody would publish that.
Wow.
They just would not publish it. It came out in England, but she could not get it published in the States. It didn't get published in the United States until October of 1946, years after she wrote it, and only after The Fountainhead became like a best-selling novel, and then suddenly everybody's like, what else did she write?
And the movie, the film
like
that came out
revisiting Caress of Steel today and going, hey, that's not so bad.
It's actually really good. But it keeps speaking, right?
Yeah, it does. It really does. Yeah. And then after Oracle, what happens?
Soliloquy.
Yeah.
He just, in total despair.
Yeah.
I've not left this cave for days now. That's the only thing that matters to him, that makes him not happy, really, but it's the only place of solace he can find is the cave. It's become my last refuge in my total despair. I have only the music of the waterfall because his guitar was taken away, destroyed. Just the waterfall, which as an environmental philosopher, I could say a lot about that, but I won't here. But just the music of the waterfall to comfort me now. I can no longer live under the control of the Federation. I'm not going to do it anymore.
But notice how he hears the waterfall differently now, okay? Because he has played the guitar, because he has created music, everything sounds different now. A lot of times, you're just oblivious this. Like I mentioned during the pandemic, and we all hated the pandemic and yada, 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 but thank God we're all still here. Okay. But one of the only good things about being at home was I got to notice stuff that I had never noticed because I wasn't here. I was busy, commuting and going to work and doing this and doing that. Right. And now suddenly it's like, wow, there's a cardinal. And that's the song Cardinal. And there's a blue jay. And that, okay. And there's
in adversity.
Yeah.
In adversity, we refocus on what's important.
Yeah. Right. So the guy is listening. He's in the cave. He might have heard that waterfall 3 million times. Yeah. But I promise you, it sure sounds different now.
No.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. And the soliloquy, like, lyrically, it's all fantastic. And the way that Neil flows the story, and we haven't really talked a lot about like the parallels to the book, but there's huge parallels to the book Anthem, of course, right? It does not end the same way that the book does, but there's a lot of similarities there, and just the way that he does this story, lyrically, is just brilliant. And Alex's guitar solo in this song is kind of like, I don't know what word to describe, but like
solos
almost, on
that record.
It's like the protagonist is in total despair, and his guitar solo echoes that. And I've said 1,000 times on every single thing that I talk about Alex's solos that he is just brilliant. He comes up with the solos that really match the mood of the song. And I think that's really important. And I think that's something that set Rush apart. He has chops, and he's shown those chops too, but he doesn't just do chops for the sake of chops. He plays a solo that's meaningful for the song. And
Alex can always do more in a single note. Than a lot of players could do, with a riff or an arpeggio.
Oh yeah.
And I could say the same about Geddy's vocals. Geddy's vocals are like the stuff the critics love to hate. But I think there are moments of brilliance in this record and in many others. Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay. And I'm not saying this because I think of Geddy as a friend. I understand some of his vocals are kind of, shall we say, acquired taste. But in this record, there are things he does that are just like,
it is.
Tears is one of those songs.
Yeah.
Tears should have been a hit. I don't care what anybody says.
It's a beautiful song.
I was no longer at Mercury at the time, but let me tell you, if I'd been there.
Yeah.
Play this one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So another novel, Evgeny Zamyatin, We influenced on that one. The structure of 2112 is after Anthem, but this was another novel that seriously influenced that. And I know, we don't have a lot of time left, which is unfortunate, but want to close with just a shout out to Kevin Anderson's book 2113. Okay.
Yes. My copy's right over too far.
No spoilers, but I'm going to say this. The story picks up where the grand finale, Soliloquy and grand finale, we have assumed control.
Man.
And Father Brown is the central character in 2113. And the end of it, if you haven't read the story, you need to go and read it, because there is a plot twist with Father Brown to something later in Rush.
Okay.
Father Brown becomes.
I'll read it.
And can I ask you guys a question? Can I ask everybody a question? Do you find the ending to 2112, do you find it depressing or hopeful? Because a lot of debate has occurred about what does that last couple of lines mean.
I saw an interview with Neil, so I don't want to say I know the answer, but he gave the answer. I wrote the quote down, so I don't know how to answer that without it being a complete spoiler. He gave an answer in an interview. Would you like me to read it?
Please, not everybody has been a fan since,
read it.
1972.
At the ending,
for me.
That's the good guys. That's the cavalry coming in at the end. It, to me, had a happy ending, as it were. The Solar Federation were going to be shut down by the vision that our hero has of this other way of living. They're the people coming in at the end. That's how I intended it. That is from Neil's mouth. I watched it.
Yeah.
On the
that's how I interpreted it too, that it wasn't like, oh my God, he's crushed. His vision lives on, and his vision is the basis
there's
for
my answer.
everything to change.
Yeah, but the main character ended in despair, and his lifeblood spilled over, as the song says. But that's not the end of the story.
Exactly. That's my point.
Yeah.
Right.
And we are the story. If we choose to just knuckle under and become the next generation of sheep, then it was a waste. He was a failure. We were all crushed, etc. But I don't think that's what Neil wanted or intended or wrote.
And was certainly not the story of Rush for the next 40 years.
Exactly.
True. Yeah. Yeah, I think.
And by the way, when I mentioned, like, some people say they've been fans since 72, there were people that saw them in the clubs, just like, high school kids playing bar mitzvahs. And even back then, they knew where they wanted to go. Did they know they were going to get there? I don't know. But as far as I can tell, 2112 is another example of the story still hasn't been written. You're the writer, write the next chapter.
And that's something for nothing.
And it's
the last song on the record.
Yeah. Another fantastic song. One of my favorites.
This
one. Yeah, but I view the ending as something positive, something happy,
Absolutely.
With that as well. And the music in Grand Finale, I think, is just incredible, right? They start, Alex starts out with his guitar and they come in and they're just rocking, they're jamming. And then towards the end, it gets like totally chaotic. Like, so Neil's kind of doing all this crazy stuff. So we drummers, we call that a trash can ending, where you're just kind of like all over the place. It's just called a trash can ending for all of you people who don't know what that is. So that's what that is. And it sounds completely chaotic, although I know that, when the band is playing this, they are still in control of what they're doing. They're not like, throwing it all to the wind. But that's kind of the vibe, that comes across. And I think that kind of can potentially go with the, we have assumed control. So it's not that the people coming in are going to make chaos, but they're going to take this order and this rigidity and get rid of some of it.
And it's almost, when you go all the way forward, Clockwork Angels. And if you read,
it's way forward.
Way forward. At the end, it's like these themes that kept maturing all through their career. Neil was, there was the watchmaker, right? Absolute perfect order. Neil on the metronome, but then there was the anarchist that I'm an individual, total freedom. I'll do what I want to do. And Neil was like, no, both of you are really just kind of wrong. Let's get somewhere between perfect order and anarchism and find some peace somewhere.
Yeah.
And closing off in the fullness of time, a garden to nurture and protect,
Yeah.
The measure of a life. What can you say? Okay.
Yep.
What can you say?
So,
the measure of a life. Yeah, what a privilege to be here just doing this. You know what I mean? Just really.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And, Rush fans, all you people out there watching, thank you. Like, subscribe, leave some comments. Agree with us, disagree with us. Let's have a conversation and tell us what 2112, the story of 2112, means to you. And thank you all so much. We'll see you next time.
Aloha.